welcome back once again to another devlog. This is number 61. Um, so jumping right into it, this this week I got a lot done. Um, I on Monday I wrapped up interscene checkpoint reloading. So if you're in a different scene, you go up the stairs and then you die, or you go to the main menu and you say reload checkpoint, or exit out the game and reload the game. The actual oh, this is interesting inner game. So yeah, if you die or you reload the checkpoint, and if you're in a different scene, it'll reload the checkpoint successfully. I on Monday I knocked out a bunch of small problems, just the usual cleanup across the board. Any issues I spot as I go that pop up, whether it's with VCams or just anything that I can fix, I go ahead and take care of. One of the issues I was seeing was actually if you are in the equipped state and you die, um, then it would actually not work correctly. Um, So what I had to do is kind of go to my checkpoint data and add some new functionality, kind of like I was thinking like this before, but this is kind of a case that I needed to implement something like this. Something I have like logic steps that happen after the final fade in or the fade out, like instructions telling you to open up the pod or whatever, but what I really need to do is like a more robust solution, like pre-logic before the screen fades back to the game. I need to have some instructions to say, some standard instructions to say, oh, if you're equipped, make sure reset the character states correctly. So I was able to do that, and yeah, just resetting the character properly. So yeah, resetting the character and the actual game state. So making sure that the it looks exactly like it did the first time, like the pod closed, the doors closed, and everything works correctly. So one of the other things I took care of was for my sectors. Um, I had like a kind of a shortcut in my initial building where I was crossing sectors. If you look at the portals, I had defined a front sector camera and a back sector camera. This explicitly like has a reference to which camera you should switch to if you're crossing a sector. And a lot of these in the beginning I said, oh, there's only one camera, so if you cross back over, just use the default camera, which is the very first one. And that was actually causing errors, like with like scene reloading. In some cases it was saying, well, I couldn't find a V camera, I'm just going to use the default camera, and it was setting it to the wrong camera. So I had to get rid of that. I had to explicitly define which camera you should switch to, and if there's no camera, then there's no camera, then I can track down the issue. So there's a case where the camera can be null and you have to clearly define it. So it's always the case where I have a lot of debug functionality, a lot of debug code that I initially built the system off, like that kind of help expedite things, but that kind of really had to be done away with and cleaned up along the way just to solidify the system so it can handle a lot of this reload functionality. Um, Another thing that I did, you probably won't be able to see it, but the actual spinner functionality, if you maybe we can bring it up here. Yeah, here we go. Yeah, this spinner here, if you I was able to make it so that it shows up regardless of how you scale the screen. It'll show up like at a consistent size and position. It took a little bit of doing, but it wasn't too bad. I just had to make it a separate canvas for it and do a bit of logic to. I had to kind of iron out the showing logic. It was a little bit flimsy, but now it's pretty solid and robust the way I know how to handle coroutines. And also, I have. I also was able to. Since I got the reloading working for death, I actually implemented. Oops. I actually implemented. I can get rid of this. Get back to 0. Yeah, here we go. I actually implemented. Go. Can't actually select this, but anyways, if you actually, if there's a case where you, I don't know, you clip through a wall or something I forgot, and you fall through the, yeah, you fall through the floor, and you go, usually you'll just fall for forever, and the game won't know how to handle it. Well, I implemented some functionality to say, okay, at some point, the system will know, like, you've fallen X amount of Y from the ground level. You're pretty much not supposed to do that. I'm gonna trigger like a scene reload. Just fade out and then reload the last checkpoint, right? So some error occurred, so it can handle it gracefully and reload the next the last checkpoint. As of now, also, if that happens, if you get stuck or something, you can always pause the game and actually go to, reload the checkpoint manually. Um, this is one of the last things I did through the week, reloading the checkpoint. This works now. Like, so wherever you are, it'll successfully, reload you at your last checkpoint. So at the end of Monday, I got the new checkpoint system like officially done, and I pushed it to main, and I was ready to, attempt a production build and finally get that production build working. After since August, I've always tried to get that thing running, and so on Tuesday, it was all about the production build, like debugging, rebuilding, and chasing down issues. So trying to get it up and running. The good news is that it only took like one night overnight to most of the shader variants were cached already, so it only took one night to actually get the build up and running. Um, but the problem, um, there was a bunch of problems with the production build. Um, I was running into some issues with my event channel listeners. So this is the first time that I've actually worked with a production build, and there's a couple like differences, especially with. So I moved to loading scenes with addressables and starting to use addressables, and there's a thing in production where um, let's just take my event channels for an example here. So if you look at these event channels, they have these scriptable objects here, and that's fine, but for some reason I would have like this event channel here in the inspector, and then an event channel linking it in the inspector as well, but the system would load them as two separate game object instances, and they were not connected. So when you send a message on one event channel, it wouldn't be received because it's two separate channels. So I had to kind of go in, kind of iron out my system to actually link the event channels correctly globally, kind of using static global references. So this new system to kind of start to figure out like why does a build handle this a certain way? It doesn't work exactly the same as as it would in a development environment. And this is the first time I've worked in. I've done production build before, but this is the first time I've had to seriously debug like new issues I hadn't seen before, and it's just like, why is it not working here? So just trying to figure that out, and also working with like in the beginning, like it was very inefficient, like trying to track down issues in a build. I could do debugging and I could do logging, but every time I need to add a new log to further trace an issue, I'd have to do a build for like 5 to 10 minutes, and I was always getting caught up. Like every other build was failing because of some issue, and it took a long time to really track down the source of the issue. Um, um, so eventually I was like, it took a long time to kind of figure out, okay, these scriptable object event system and how to address the issue. Um, and so I was beginning to on Tuesday. I had the beginnings of a new way to handle the event channel SO system, and I was getting some fixes in, and things are starting to, putting back the basic pieces of functionality in a production build. Um, so that continued on to Wednesday. This week was all about getting the production build up to scratch, like pretty much on par with the development build, right? Um, so I kind of advanced. I kind of looked around for some tools because I needed some sort of tool. Like I said before on Tuesday, I was able to do like link up the exe with the debugger, and that helps, and um, add logs. But I really needed some way, like in the editor, you can actually see, you can go in here, you can see the state of the application, the game objects, the hierarchy, what's enabled. You can look at the inspector and see the field, see if things have gone null, what's the state of things. You can't really do that in production. You're really kind of working halfway blind, and I needed something to kind of give me most of my perception back about this, what's going on inside the build, because things were not. It was just really hard to track down issues with just dev logs and debugging alone. So I found an application called Proxima, and that basically allows me to hook into an HTTP service and pretty much replicate and see, for the most part, see my hierarchy and all the objects that are loaded at that current state and time. And it's pretty great. It allows me to customize and like add buttons and test, run commands while in production. So it pretty much brings me, 90% there as far as tools to expedite tracking down issues and debugging and testing. So that's a big thing. I still have to be very strategic about my builds. Like, um, I have to be focused on what I'm going to test. So I can't really load the whole game and do a build for the whole game when I just need to test certain functionality surrounding, say, the loading process or interscene loading. I just need 2 levels. I don't need all the levels, right? So I have to be strategic because doing builds can be like time expensive, and you want to make fixes, and in order to test those fixes in a production build, you want to make sure you're doing as least amount of rebuilds as you have to, right? Um, so I was getting more efficient with my testing, and with that new tool, I could really, kind of really pin down kind of the root of, how the production build system works with addressables compared to the developer system. And by the end of Wednesday, I was really understanding, you know, the differences. And it really had it had really surrounding issues with what happens when you load and unload scenes. Like one of the issues I was seeing was on the if you go back to the main menu and you load the game up again or whatever, in the development, the sound of the menu when you hit continue, it continues into the loading screen. It continues until it's done, and then it fades out nicely, right? But in production, as soon as you hit continue, the audio cuts, and it's just like, why does it do that? Well, the turn these breakpoints off here. What was happening is that uh, assets, these assets like the background and the mixer, they're tied to the menu scene. When you unload the menu scene, the editor, when you're running an editor, you're running in the editor. If you unload a scene and somebody else is still using it, that's still in the hierarchy, those assets will stick around. But in production, if you have assets explicitly tied to a scene and that's unloaded, it will unload those assets, and any other object or scene that has references assets um, will lose those assets will go null and it'll cause problems. So what you need to do is you need to have those assets that are causing problems that need to stay around and not be tied to a single scene. They need to be loaded as addressables, and the property references set, right? So I was working through issues and figuring out which assets were causing trouble and adding assets as I go. And in different situations, it mostly revolved around that. And that was really the source of the problem. And that's kind of the source of the problem with the game event channel as well. Let's see here. Let's connect that. And okay, so yeah, so tracking it down a lot of, just testing a lot of different things in production, and anything seen as an issue, it mostly involved around is a case of me having to add an addressable asset and load that addressable asset in a way where, like, especially when you're going in between scenes, like going upstairs, um, those assets, when the scene's unloaded, those assets will be lost and be causing issues. So that's kind of what I was doing. And by the end of Wednesday, the production build issues are starting to go away, and things are starting to feel solid and pretty comparable to the development build. Um, on Thursday morning, just more issues, sneaky issues sorted out. I was mostly working on issues surrounding, tracking down issues and making sure that the actual scene loading works when you go in production, when you go from one scene to the other. And so basically, just, up to the up to the next scene, making sure all that works. And I made sure to migrate the rest of my channel functionality because I knew that, even though it's not what I'm testing right now, I knew that it wouldn't work. So if you die or you're trying to switch a weapon, any global event channel functionality, I make sure that that's been migrated to a new system so it works in production. So on Thursday, I was really working on issues with scene transition and scene reloading. So if you're in a different scene and um, just making sure that the checkpoint loads correctly if you if you restart the game from anywhere, like, or restart the game from a different scene, or die from a different scene. Just make sure that all that functionality works correctly. And by the end of Thursday, I got that working pretty good, pretty solid. Couldn't really see any more issues. Um, and on the last chunk of the time on the day, I started working on the final piece of functionality, which is making sure. So now that all the reload functionality is working, you know, when the app is running, I need to make sure that if I cross a checkpoint, that and then I stop the game app and then I reload the game app, the system could actually know and remember the last the last checkpoint, because it would just reset itself. Like there's no persistence going on here when the production app stops and starts again. So I started kind of designing and architecting how that would actually work. And it turns out I had this previous system, this prototype system I thought I was going to use, but it turns out all I really need to do is simply save a string that identifies the current checkpoint, and from that string I can derive all other data, like, what the state of the application should be, just based off that last checkpoint string ID, right? And from there, I was basically able to, uh, load the right checkpoint as an addressable and set that as the right, to the right level data. And testing in production, it all. So I got that fixed on the Friday morning. That was all working. Tested in production, where you restart the app and it would actually remember your last checkpoint. So that was the final piece of, like, the new checkpoint system, making sure that the persistent data works in production build, right? And now, so the big milestone is, like, I finally got, you know, a production build working on par with how it works in the editor, the development environment. And the new checkpoint system has been validated in production build, because I needed to validate that SO data persistence, right? Um, so that pretty much, that was like getting the checkpoint system done. That's another milestone, and so that goes to main. And from at the end of Friday, I turned back to the development project and started working on development features that I kind of since I got sidetracked with doing a lot of work fixing issues in the production build. I was seeing a lot of shader issues with my alpha fade shader in the production build, but for some reason when I switched back to this development project, they've all fixed themselves. So I'm not sure what's going on there. So as long as it's working, that's not really an issue right now. I replaced the pause menu. There used to be a save load button to kind of generally save and load from anywhere, and I replaced it with this reload checkpoint button. So far from just dying and reload, now that or if you get stuck, now you can just hit reload with a modal confirm screen, and it will allow you to reload from the last checkpoint, um, like that. Um, so yeah, it's all looking good. Also, I implemented on the main menu. I implemented functionality. So I switched the replay because I don't want the user just going down to the replay and actually accidentally selecting replay and it wipes out their data. I moved it to the right so they have to go right and then select it. And then there's a modal to confirm that you want to reset the current checkpoint data to the very first one of the chapter, right? Um, and this will save as persistence too. So if you do this, it'll load the chapter, but on the very first checkpoint, right? So yeah, so there's that, and after just tidying that up, that's pretty much all the things I want to do for the current development. And I kind of moved on to the next things on the board, which was looking into the feel package, right? That means, so we're now moving on to like the next stage where it's like, now we're going to be working with AI a little bit more and getting attacked. Like what happens when you get shot? Okay, you just bleed and stuff, and that's fine. But I'm talking about like screen shake and like maybe like different effects, like that kind of add or like haptic of the controller, like when you take a hit or when you shoot the weapon, there's some sort of haptics going on, like. So I'm going to be exploring those packages next week. The next couple things are, yeah, the feel package and kind of getting ideas about how I can integrate these features into my game to basically juice up the experience. What kind of features does this package offer? How, what can I put them on? Just getting ideas. And then also the other package I'm exploring is the dialogue system package, right? This is for like narrative. So one of the things on my list is like when you come into this room, there's going to be a little bit of a dialogue between two guards or something, right? Like exploring that package. Do I have like a UI in the bottom section of the screen having, dialogue like some RPGs do, or am I going to have pop-up text boxes? That's to be explored. And to kind of keep those things on the back burner, I'll probably implement some of those features as prototypes. But as I go along, I'll really kind of identify what I really want to do with these packages and make them full-fledged production features. But for right now, I'm just going to discover those packages for the time being. And then after those packages, it's really the next epic leg is really working with is getting the interaction in the rooms now. Now that I've taken care of everything else, getting the interactions in the room now, the actual meat and potatoes, the heart of the experience, the gameplay of the rooms, interaction between the character interaction and the AI, right? What's happening. That's really the essence of the game, right? So that's it for this week. We did a lot of good stuff here. It was a lot of work, but that's a core foundational system. Having the checkpoint system in place, right? Features, to save and load and progress through the game without losing progress. So, thanks for joining me on this journey, and we will talk to you next time. Goodbye.